Hey everybody, it's Vanessa the Crafty Gemini and welcome to WIP Wednesday episode number 89. Can y'all believe that? 89 episodes of WIP Wednesdays. We've been going live here over the past couple years. So welcome everybody. Let's make sure that technology's on our side. If you can see me and hear me, just pop into the chat box whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook and let us know where you're tuning in from. I see several of you have already chimed in. Hey, Patricia's tuning in from Tucson, Arizona. We got Mudcat 1256 from Cleveland, Ohio. Hi, Diana, tuning in from Bellingham, Mass. Carol's in the house from Michigan. Okay, great. Marilyn's in from Melbourne, Florida, which is southeast of us here in north central Florida. Great. Tracy from Mississippi. Hey. And Kim from Minnesota. Great. Y'all can see me and hear me. So let's go ahead and get started. Today I'm going to be answering some pre-submitted questions that I've received. And one of them has to do with some stuff that we chatted about last week during WIP Wednesday. So let's go ahead and switch everybody over to my over-the-shoulder camera shot here. And we're going to start off talking about zipper feet. So last week, if you didn't get a chance to watch WIP Wednesday episode 88, check it out because we were talking a little bit about zipper feet because as some of you may know, I recently opened up registration for Mini Bag Club number 3. It's now closed, but we are working our way through the projects and one of the projects was my stand-up pencil pouch here. And several of the students, as they were going through the video lessons, were having issues sewing the zipper tape close to this edge because we can't really move the zipper pull completely out of the way for it. So you need to be able to get close without letting the metal part of the zipper pull kind of get in your way. And so we chatted a little bit about that last week, and I shared with you 2 different zipper feet for 2 different sewing machines. Now, I have another one here that I wanted to share with y'all for a home domestic low shank sewing machine. And if you have a Juki LB5020 that maybe you've purchased from us in the past, then you might want to click the link that I've included for you in the YouTube description box of this WIP Wednesday episode because I put in the link for the one that I bought. That way you know that it will work. But when I put it on the machine, we'll talk a little bit more about how to use it and some things to keep in mind before you load it up on your machine and start sewing, okay? So let's go over this again. When you open up a sewing machine that comes with any type of accessories, it's going to come with some stuff if you bought it new. But say you're getting a hand-me-down machine, you may want to look through the stuff that came with it to see if you have some different accessories, like some additional specialty presser feet, okay? And so here I have 3 different zipper feet. The one on the left, you can see it's kind of bigger. It gets kind of screwed on to the whole setup of the machine. And this one just looks a little bit more industrial because it belongs to my Juki TL 2010Q that I've had for almost 9 years now, and it is a semi-industrial machine, okay? But this is like out of the box, the zipper foot that comes with it, and you'll see that it has 2 little cutout notches on either side, but the rest of the foot is the same width pretty much all the way down. It's like, it looks like a little sled, okay? So narrow, and I don't have anything bulky sticking out in the back here that can get caught on anything that I might have in my project, whether it be a zipper pull, a pocket, some type of hardware, or anything like that. It's pretty narrow and straight across, okay? All right, so then we talked about this last week also. This is for my semi-industrial machine. Now on my home sewing machine that I use most often here on WIP Wednesdays because it's smaller, it's a great secondary machine for those of you that have maybe a bigger, fancier machine set into a table in your home sewing space. This makes a great retreat sewing machine or class sewing machine, or also for a beginner or somebody who's ready to upgrade to their next kind of step-up machine. This is the Juki LB5020, and I'm going to zoom out so y'all can see the machine. If you've watched any of my episodes here, you definitely have seen this machine. We sell these in our online shop, and I think currently we stay restocking them, but right now I think maybe we have just a couple left. But let me show y'all. This machine, similar to a lot of the home sewing machines, whether they be mechanical or computerized, has snap-on presser feet. So there's a little tab on the back, it's black, I press it, and it drops the presser foot off of the machine. So I can remove what I like to call the universal foot, which is on my machine maybe 95% of the time. And then the one that it came with is this zipper foot, okay? So if we talk a little bit about the anatomy of a zipper foot, y'all, I think I went over this last week too, mine has a clip-on bar, which is this little metal bar here, and then it has cutout notches on the left and on the right hand side. Okay, this is the one that came with the machine. Yours may look, depending on your make and model, it might look similar to this, slightly different, but if it snaps on, chances are it's gonna look pretty close to this, and once you see it in your accessory bin, you'll know, oh, okay, that must be the zipper foot, because it's gonna look somewhat like this, okay? Now, you can snap the foot on the left of this bar or on the right on either side, depending on what side of something, whether it be a zipper or a seam or, you know, hardware or the edge of a pocket, depending on how close you want the needle to come down next to something, you can clip it on either side. Me, 90% of the time, I'm clamping it onto the left, but you'll hear me say in some of my projects, if you have signed up for some of my digital bag courses that are on-demand lessons, I have more time to kind of walk y'all through and explain why I'm doing each thing. And so some of you that may be students of mine in some of those courses have seen where I'm like, okay, now we're gonna turn the project around, and for this I recommend that you clamp on your zipper foot on the right side of that bar so that we can get the needle on this side, and it'll make it a little bit easier to stitch, you know, whether it's top stitching through exterior and lining fabric or whatever the case may be. But that also gives my students an opportunity to see when is the time that you would switch this, okay? But again, like I said, 90% of the time, I just clamp it on my left because that tends to be in line with when I'm sewing something, I keep the bulk of the project to my left versus trying to cram it in a smaller throat space area like here, okay? So this is the snap-on foot. Now, I went ahead on Amazon and ordered, and I'll put the link, my Amazon affiliate link for this narrow zipper foot. Y'all can see the big difference here, right? This one is like a baby version of the semi-industrial one. The same way that I mentioned that this is narrow and it tapers off the full way, this one is just like that, like a little baby ski that doesn't stick out. It doesn't have a chunky area in the back. It's all pretty much in line with the same width. So notice a difference again with these two guys, okay? And we talked about this before, and in some instances, as I mentioned last week, the width of this part, okay, because it has that longer bar, like I said, we can clamp it to the left or to the right. We have a longer bar to give us those options. On this one, you don't have that long bar. You see how it's only about 1/4 of an inch long. So how does this zipper foot work? Well, one, it's super narrow. So a lot of you that are in my Mini Bag Club 3 already mentioned that you went ahead and bought a narrow zipper foot and it's made a world of a difference. So it's important to note the anatomy of the different feet and figure out what works better for you based on the types of projects that you're sewing. So I'm gonna clamp this one onto my Juki LB5020 sewing machine, and I'm gonna tell you some specific things that you have to keep in mind if you're gonna do the same thing and get your hands on a narrow zipper foot, okay? So let's zoom in to where the zipper foot goes. Oop, wrong one. Zoom this way. All right. So it's the same clamp-on thing, but because I cannot clamp to the left or the right, it's just one bar, that tells me right off the bat, I'm not clamping on the zipper foot based on where I need my needle to be. Instead, with the narrow one, you clamp it on and then you need to adjust the stitch width on your sewing machine if you're stitching a straight stitch. If y'all have taken my classes before and you've watched my videos, especially here on WIP Wednesday, you know that I say this all the time. When we're sewing a straight stitch, there is no width, right? When you're stitching a zigzag and the needle goes in here and out here, in here and out here, there is a width because you can adjust how far over to the left the needle gets inserted into the project and how far over to the right with each zig and zag, okay? On a straight stitch, you're just sewing straight, so there's no width. So what happens on a machine that allows you to change up the stitch width is that it basically moves the needle position, okay? So the default needle position on this machine is 3.5, which puts the needle right in the center. With this narrow zipper foot, you don't want to leave it there because if I come down, I'm hitting, with the needle in the center, it's hitting the metal bar of the zipper foot. So this is the most important thing, is that once you install this narrower one, because you can't go left or right, you need to stop and move the needle over into one of the two notches that is already carved out of that presser foot, okay? Let me put, I'm gonna put something a little dark behind here just to help y'all see where that is. And if you have a sewing machine, of course, you're gonna know what I'm talking about here. But here on the machine, let me zoom in a little bit for y'all. Okay, my pointer tool. So that little zipper foot has a little cutout on the right side of the center and on the left side of the center. So I need to adjust the width on my machine, keeping an eye on the needle, and I need to scoot it over. Do I want the needle to come down on the left notch or the right notch? And so you need to figure that out first before you just start sewing, okay? Because this is changing the area that's open and available for that needle to come down in. So be very careful. I don't want y'all busting up your machine or breaking a needle. So I'm going to move the needle over to the far left position, and this is just to my machine. Not all home sewing machines will be the same, but if you have this machine that you've purchased from us, then you know if you set the needle position to 0, on this machine, that means the far left position. It won't go any more left than that. And that I can see by bringing down my hand wheel, by turning the hand wheel towards me, puts it in exactly the center of the left side notch of the zipper foot, okay? So I know that that will work. Now, how far over do I need to come to get the needle to come down in the right side notch? Well, let's audition it. Oh, and I'm in half of a stitch because I took a stitch. Let me just come back up and complete that stitch before it can let me adjust it. Okay, so I'm coming over, and the furthest I can go to the right with the width on this machine is 7 millimeters. Now, 7 millimeters on this machine is way to the right of the right side notch. So if you wanted to come down like right in the center, like the far left position set us up for, you can bring it in a little. And I'll just tell y'all, because I know a bunch of you have bought this machine from us, so you can jot this down in your notes. So it looks like 5.5 for the right side needle position brings me down right in the middle of that right side notch. So you'll have to take some notes and put it with your stuff so that you know, hey, when you're using this presser foot, I need to remember to change the needle position by adjusting the stitch width before I just, floor the foot pedal and break a needle, okay? Great. Yes, Mary Grace says I keep my narrow foot on my Juki about 95% of the time, which is great. And I feel like this is something that comes with a little bit more confidence. If you're a beginner, the more you sew and the more comfortable you get with using different accessory feet, the more likely you are to use something like that, how Mary Grace just mentioned, and keeping something narrow like this about 95% of the time. That tells me, Mary Grace, that you are very confident with working with different seam allowances. The narrower the foot, the more you can see, and you can scoot over 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, and kind of get those stitches exactly where you want them to be. And that just comes with, using your sewing machine more and playing around with these specialty feet, okay? Awesome. Star says, thank you, Vanessa, for the zipper foot link for my LB5020, ordering it today. She was afraid to order before. Great. And so that's what I wanted to do for sure, because there are options out there. Now, be careful. I mentioned that the link that I've included to the Amazon affiliate link is for this one, which obviously I know works on this machine. If you have another low shank machine that takes snap-on feet, chances are it will work. Make sure that you read the product description, like you would do anytime you're purchasing anything off of Amazon, to make sure that your machine make and model will work with that. Of course, you can always return it if it doesn't, but this is specifically for low shank clip-on feet machines. And there's other machines that you can use this one on, like different Brother, Kenmore models and things like that. But the link again to that is in the video description box here on YouTube, and we'll put it in the caption for y'all if you're watching on Facebook also, okay? So make sure that you check the needle position anytime you change the foot. That doesn't just go for zipper feet. If you put on an applique foot, if you put on a buttonhole foot, whatever it is, reference your user manual if it's the first time you're using it, and definitely make sure that you have clearance for the needle to come down and stitch before you hit that foot pedal, okay? So that's one. I wanted to do that kind of versus clip here to show you the difference between the regular zipper foot that came with the sewing machine and the narrow one, as y'all can see, okay? Now, let's talk a little bit about it in use, in an actual project. Let me grab this here. Okay, so this was the little sample. We were talking about making one of my little pop-up zip pouch here, the pencil pouch, the stand-up pencil pouch that is. And we were talking about zipper feet because we were mentioning this area here, where we have to sew the zipper on a curve. And when you get right to this area, yes, you can reach in there and kind of help that zipper pull get up and out of your way. But even when you do reach this area, it's still a really tight fit, okay? And so you can see if we grab the different zipper feet, and this is something I showed last week, was that if I'm stitching here, look at the width of this zipper foot. As I come here, it can get hung up. on the chunkiness of the zipper pull. Now this especially comes into play if you're using a larger zipper, like a 4.5 handbag zipper or a 5 handbag zipper, because as you already know, not only is the zipper tape wider, but the teeth on the zipper tape are larger and the metal zipper pull is bigger also. So if you kind of scoot it far over when you're working with one of those larger zippers, you won't run into the issue. But if you're using a larger zipper foot seam allowance, then you could get a little bit closer and that can be an issue. So this is where the handy little narrow zipper foot comes into play. I mean, look at this. The whole thing practically fits in the seam allowance. And I know that as I come along here sewing, I'm not even close. Like I literally have clearance, like room there on the zipper tape to clear that zipper pull. And that's going to help you get past the bulk easier, not get your stitches hung up in an area, which is also going to allow you to sew straighter, right? Because if you're sewing along straight and you hit something, you know your seam is going to get a little bit wonky and we don't like that. Right? So if you sew a lot of zippers or handbags, or you like to stitch up close and top stitch different things like that having to do with pouches and handbags, I highly recommend grabbing yourself one of these little narrow zipper feet, okay? Aside from the one that comes with the machine, if it comes with a wider one. Some machines may come with a narrow one. Check it out, pull it out of your accessory bin and give it a go, okay? All right. Oh, thank you, Susie. She says, I love that fabric on your pencil pouch. Thanks. All right. Hi, Sheila. Welcome. You're late to the party, but you're here. Okay, so that was the first one. Next question is from JJ. And JJ asks, when making a zippered bag or pouch with a lining, what is the rule for top stitching the lining? Do we not top stitch it? Do we top stitch outside of the bag and lining together? Or do we leave an inch on each side? Great question. So at the end of the day, it's going to come down to personal preference, right? Oftentimes when we're working on a project, at least when I teach my classes, I always recommend to my students that they make one first the way that I designed it to be. The way that I'm teaching you in the video lessons, go ahead and make it like that, because that's going to allow you to follow step by step the videos. And then once you go from beginning to end and you make the project, then you'll understand how it all comes together, and it sets you up for more success so that you can then go back and hack it, change it up, say, okay, I didn't like this technique that she used for this. I'm going to do my own thing and do that. But after you make it once all the way through, you're going to feel a little bit more comfortable and confident with making changes to it. So the question JJ is asking is about the top stitching out here. Okay. Now this pouch, this is my zip and zip pouch that we're working on in Mini Bag Club number 3, which is closed. But if you're interested in signing up, you can do a search for it on my site and add yourself to the wait list. It's not open right now for registration at the moment. But top stitching is usually when you install a zipper, okay? You have exterior fabric, you have lining fabric, and usually you'll see a line of top stitching here. Now top stitching just means stitching that you're doing that's not actually hidden in a seam. It's exposed. It's on top, hence top stitching, okay? So first thing, as in part of answering JJ's question, is I always recommend that if you are top stitching, now this goes for bags, for pouches, for garments, for quilt binding if you're machine quilting it, I always top stitch from the pretty side, the side that I'm going to see when the project is complete. And that's going to allow you to get the neatest coverage, because you're going to be able to follow the guide, whatever it is, the edge of a seam, your zipper tape, a top edge of a strip of fabric, whatever it may be. But if you're following it along that edge, you're more likely to get a nice straight line of sewing. Instead of stitching it from the outside in, you could be following an inside guide and it looks straight to you on the inside, but then on the more exposed side, it's crooked. I rather it be straight on the side that shows out to the public. Does that make sense? So if you are going to top stitch, I always top stitch from the pretty side, and you'll hear me say that in my classes. So this one I said has no top stitching. Let me show you one that has top stitching. Here's one. Now the distance of the top stitching, again, is going to be personal preference. If it's just fabric, or maybe fabric that you interface with like a Bosal fashion fuse, some type of cotton woven fusible interfacing, which is pretty lightweight and very commonly used in bag making for linings, I can easily top stitch 1/8 of an inch down from where the fabric meets the zipper tape, okay? But because this project features foam, we know the foam is bulkier, it's thicker, right? This is the foam that I use, and this is Bosal Inner Form, the sew-in version. You can see it's even thicker than some lightweight battings, all right? Because it's thicker, you're gonna have a lot more bulk in the seam allowance. And so in these instances, I tend to top stitch a 1/4 of an inch away, so that the bulkiness of that seam, if I used a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, is now getting compressed into that little ridge, and you can see that you end up with a really nice straight line of top stitching because I stitched from the outside, okay? Now, the question was, are the 3 different suggestions: do we not top stitch it? Do we top stitch outside of the bag and lining together, which is what I did in this instance. The stitching that was done here shows up on the inside because it was done through the exterior and the lining fabric. Okay, that was the second option JJ mentioned there. And then the third option says, do we leave an inch on each side? So this is great because leaving an inch open, meaning untop stitched on each side from the side seams, gives you kind of a hybrid of top stitching and non-top stitching. Okay, so let me explain to some of you that may be a little bit newer why we even top stitch. Several reasons, and I said at the end of the day, it's personal preference. A lot of times we like to use a contrasting color for top stitching, or we'll use a variegated thread color to add another pop of color to the top stitching because, again, I mentioned you see the stitching from the outside. So you can use it as a decorative element of completing and finishing off your projects nicely, okay? The other thing is that when we have a zippered project, you will most often see designers tell you to top stitch because if the bag is lined, top stitching everything down and away from the zipper is going to prevent that lining fabric from over time, or say when you wash the project, from over time from lifting up and getting caught in the zipper teeth when you go to open and close it. Y'all have had garments like that, right? Where the zipper gets stuck and it's pulling on the lining fabric. So it serves that functional purpose. We push and press everything down and in, and then we top stitch to secure that lining down and in. Okay, so we don't have that issue. Now, the problem, and if y'all are in my mini bag club 3, when this video course, the video course for the third project, which is my zip and zip pouch, when it goes up on Friday, you'll see that I talk about top stitching and not top stitching, and you'll see that on this one I didn't for this specific reason, and I'll share it with all of y'all here, is that when you top stitch, okay, especially on this one, it has a zippered pouch inside of it, you can see that you kind of get these little pinches in the fabric right here. This could definitely stand to get another press, but you know what I'm pointing at here. There's a pinch in the fabric in here and in here, okay? And that comes from constructing the bag. I'm sewing pretty sides to pretty sides of the exterior panels, pretty side to pretty side of the lining panel, and you do that after it's been top stitched. So the top stitching has secured everything down, but then I need to go in and match this intersecting seams here, and that's what gives me that result. So if you don't like that little pinched look in the far corners, guess what? You're probably not going to want to top stitch, and I'll show you the difference in this one where I left the top stitching off. Here you can see it finishes a little bit more seamlessly, and I don't have those pinches. It's pretty smooth. Of course, it's a little bit bulkier there because we're using fabric, then foam interfacing, then the lining fabric, and the lining fabric has interfacing as well. So it is bulky just because there's a lot of layers there, but I don't have those little pinches because I did not top stitch before I constructed the bag. Okay, so those already are some different scenarios on when you might want to top stitch and not top stitch. The other option that JJ mentioned here was to leave an inch on each side. So this would give you, like I mentioned, a hybrid version of completing and finishing your projects. So say you wanted to do some top stitching because you wanted to use a fun thread, or you do like the idea of sinking that lining in and securing it with the top stitching so it doesn't come up on you, but you don't like the little pinches that we have here on the corners, okay? That is when you could totally use that third option, and that is leave an inch away from the side seam unstitched, okay? So in this case, what I would do is mark where I'm going to be starting and stopping my top stitching, and make sure that you take just 1 or 2 back stitches to secure that stitching. You don't want to just start sewing and not have it be secured into a seam or with a lock or back stitch, okay? Because over time, it's just going to rip out. So start an inch away, or whatever you decide, an inch and a half if you just want a little bit of top stitching right in this general area. Mark it on both sides so you know the line is now going to be even on both sides of the bag, and then go in with your top stitching, just making sure to back stitch at the beginning and end. So that will serve the purpose of keeping the lining in so it doesn't lift up, but it will also help you avoid those little puckers in the corner because it'll be like this. That area won't have top stitching before you go in to construct the side seams of the bag. Wow, that's a lot of talking, but hopefully it makes sense to y'all, okay? Great. Oh, I see a lot of you that are on here are in Mini Bag Club number 3, and they're saying, cute pouch, I can't wait to make it. Mari is saying, the project I'm most waiting for. Good. So yes, Zena says, good to see both ways, with and without. Yeah, so I like to let people know, because a lot of times when we start off making these projects, you're just like, oh, well, I always see her top stitch, so I'm just going to keep top stitching, right? But y'all know how I like to teach. I like to explain why I'm doing it. And know that at the end of the day, you always have options. Whatever feels comfortable for you, feel free to do it, right? Yes, these don't have top stitching. Is the lining going to lift up? It might over time, but guess what? The whole thing is made out of designer quality quilting cottons. I know that this entire pouch, I can throw it in my washing machine, I can pop it in the dryer, and when it comes out, all I got to do is take my iron, push everything back into position, you know, get the lining corners all the way tucked in, give it a little press, and that's it. You're back to using it, okay? So it will work either way. It's just a matter of personal preference, okay? Great. Let's see. Winless Original says this is such a great way to install zippers. I like how the bag can be fully opened. Yes, so that's one of the reasons why we have this zipper insertion technique. If you had a pouch this big and the zipper went from here to here, okay, you would only be able to open it like that much, you see? So in this instance, because we install the zipper a little bit of a ways from the side seam, we can open it fully here. And the same thing goes for here. We have a little bit of a tab that we can hold on to for zipping it shut and open. And then it opens fully on the other side because the zipper is not clamped down at those side seams. So yes, I hope y'all that are in Mini Bag Club number 3 are gonna love this. The video course again goes up as scheduled on Friday at noon. For those of you that like it and want to sign up, you can either add yourself to the wait list of the club itself, or at the end of this mini club, which should be mid to late May, we will release the classes for individual sale. Okay, so you'll be able to just buy this video course individually if you like it. Okay. All right, so that was good. Great question, JJ. I love how JJ wrote in about those 3 options because I wanted to touch on all 3 of those. Okay, let's see. Next question I have here. Besides bag linings, what else do you use Bozal Fashion Fuse for? So this is a great question because Bozal Fashion Fuse is probably one of the most used interfacings across all my projects, and I have some of it here. Now let's talk a little bit about what exactly it is to begin with, okay? This is Bozal Fashion Fuse. Pretty sheer because you can still see the lines right through my cutting table here. It's a nice 100% cotton fusible interfacing, okay? So first of all, we know just by looking at how it drapes and how pretty sheer it is, it's a lightweight. This is not considered medium weight, okay? This is going to be a lightweight interfacing. However, when you fuse this, even though you see how drapey it is, when you fuse this to cotton fabric, together they make like almost a double layer of cotton fabric. So then you end up with a fabric that has a little more body than this by itself or the fabric by itself. Does that make sense? So don't just, when you're looking and shopping around for interfacings or trying to figure out which one of your big stash of interfacings to use for a project, don't just think about the drape and the hand of the interfacing. Think about it with the added fabric to it, all right? Now, Bozal Fashion Fuse, this is what we carry in our shop, and we have a custom-made size of this that we sell at 60 inches wide by 1 yard. So if you are using this to interface large pieces of lining fabrics for big purses, big totes and stuff, I highly recommend it because usually I think the Bozal equivalent of this is, I always forget, Shape Flex or SF101 is what you can get, say you go to Joann's or something and buy the Pellon equivalent, but most of those interfacings come at 20 inches wide. So you need a lot more yardage and you don't get such a huge continuous piece in one package. So you can use the link below. We sell them at craftygemini.com/shop in a 60-inch wide piece by 1 yard, which is huge, okay? Now, what other stuff besides bag linings can we use this for? So we know we use it in bag linings, and I'll just point out, so if you're new to this product, you can see kind of where I used it. I used Bozal Fashion Fuse to line or to interface the lining fabric in the pouch, and I also used it to interface the exterior fabric on the inside zippered pouch, okay? So it's not like you can see it really crisp or stiff, but it just gives a little bit more body to a project. So we've established that's a very common use for it. And then I wanted to share some different types of projects and instances where you could use this. So here's one that sometimes people ask me, but I don't think I've ever mentioned it here, and that is to stabilize t-shirts for t-shirt quilts. How many of y'all have making a t-shirt quilt on your list of things to do, or you've always wanted to make one, but you don't know where to start? Well, I have over the years had really good success with using Bosal Fashion Fuse to stabilize stretch knit fabrics. Now, we're talking about t-shirt quilts because that's kind of, if you don't sew clothes with stretchy fabrics, that's most of the time where quilters will deal with fabrics that stretch. So I have a little sample scrap piece here of a cotton spandex fabric. And this, I've made leggings, pajamas, t-shirts. It's 95% cotton, 5% spandex, okay? So the degree of greatest stretch is gonna run perpendicular to the selvage. So this one still has the selvage edge on it, so I know that if I stretch perpendicular to the selvage edge, I'm gonna get a good bit of stretch, okay? Parallel to the selvage is the lengthwise grain, so on a stretch knit, it's still gonna stretch, it's just not gonna stretch as much as the crosswise grain, okay? So it's still super slinky. Now you might be wondering, how in the world would you sew something like this? It's going to be moving and stretching and puckering on you. Well, you just stabilize it. And one good product to use is this Bosal Fashion Fuse. So if I just place this on top and pretend that this is like the front of a little t-shirt and you're wanting to make a t-shirt quilt, you would cut your t-shirts, the front of them or the back, you know, if they have like event things or marathon t-shirts or whatever t-shirts. I would cut it out to a specific size, and a lot of quilters will use their larger rulers for that, like a 10.5-inch square or 12.5-inch square ruler. They just place it on top as a template and cut right around their t-shirt. And then I'm placing this wrong side of the stretch knit fabric, touching the scratchy side of the interfacing, okay? The scratchy side of a Bosal Fashion Fuse is what the scratchiness you feel is tiny dots of adhesive, okay? So if I position the wrong side of it up on top like that, then I like to mist it with my little spray mist bottle. These are great because you don't get like a sharp, you know, strong stream. I'm just going to add a little bit of water on top because out here we have a well, we have hard water, and I don't want to put that water in my iron. Okay, let me kickstart my iron here. So instead of adding water to my iron to create the steam from the iron, because this is a steam iron, I mist the fabric itself and then I'll hit the fabric with the heat of the dry iron, and then it'll create steam, okay? Yes, so Eunice says, anytime I make something with t-shirts, I use SF101 on the back. So great. Oh, Clovis says, I've started one, but haven't finished. Let's see. Welcome. I see some of y'all are chiming in now. Great. So let me see if this iron is warmed up a little bit. And then I will just press it on top. Of course, you need to check the settings on your iron. If you're going to be fusing, I mean, before you start chopping up those t-shirts, I would just give it a look and see what the fiber content is of the shirts, because not all of them are 100% cotton these days. Most of the time, you'll have some type of a cotton polyester blend, and so you want to make sure that you're not, you know, hitting polyester with a super, super hot iron at a cotton setting. Another thing you can do is not worry so much about that, but just make sure that you have a pressing sheet on top, and that way you'll at least have a buffer in between the heat of the iron and any synthetic fibers that may be in that t-shirt material, okay? So then I would just and I'm just going to keep pressing this until I feel like it's fully dry. And then I would let it cool for a few seconds and flip it over and see, hey, am I missing any spots or whatever, you know? But the same way we're talking about using this fashion fuse for t-shirt quilts, I want to show you the stabilized fabric because I think, you know, your brain, your creative juices are going to start going, and then you might think, hey, I have some stretch knit scraps in my stash, and if you're not planning to make clothes or use them for the stretchy characteristics of the fabric, you can stabilize them and use them just like you would a cotton. Oftentimes we find really cute prints that are stretch knits, right? If maybe you want to use it for a zippered pouch, but you know that when stretchy, it won't really work as well. You can stabilize it with the Bosal Fashion Fuse and then use it just like you would a woven fabric, because it's going to be a little bit stiffer, and you can see that I can no longer make it stretch, okay? Oh, this camera died. I was wondering why I was looking at myself. Give me a second. I think the iron kicked it off. It tripped it, yeah. There we go. Well, good. Luckily, I finished fusing it already, so that should be fine. Okay. That's what happens when I set. That iron is super strong. They don't even make it anymore. It heats up like no other iron I have. Okay, so this is what I was, my hands were down here doing nothing for y'all to see. So here it is. You can see, look, remember how stretchy it was earlier? And I mean, I'm pulling on it. But because I've fused it to a woven interfacing, because remember I said this Bosal Fashion Fuse is 100% cotton. So it's woven, it's not a knit like this. Look at that, nice and stabilized. So go ahead and take a second look. This way, notice I have my selvage edge here. Crosswise grain is always going to stretch more than the lengthwise grain. So this side, why do you think that is? Why do you think I can stretch this a little bit? Well, if you use cotton fabrics in your projects, you know that although cotton, quilting cottons, woven fabrics that we usually use, although they are not stretchy, they do have more stretch and give along the same crosswise grain. So here I have a sample piece of fabric, and this is just cotton, quilting cotton, okay? But here's my selvage. So let's tug this one perpendicular to the selvage, and you'll see that I can stretch it a little. You see that? Whereas in the lengthwise grain, I can't really stretch it at all. So because this happens on a woven, that makes sense that that will happen here, right? Because Fashion Fuse is a woven interfacing. Remember I said it's cotton. So it acts just like if I were to put kind of a lightweight cotton muslin on the back. So that's why you still have a little bit of give in this direction. But it's not enough really to affect too much. This is my preferred method for stabilizing stretch knits that you don't want to stretch. So consider that if you have a lot of this and you might have some scraps at home. So you can do like, say one of these pouches, take a bunch of scraps for stretch knits, stabilize them all to basically make your own woven fabric and make it patchwork on the front of a pouch. That would look super cute, and it also will have a softer feel to it because it is a stretch knit fabric, okay? All right, let me make sure I'm not missing anything here. Sherry's asking, is the Fashion Fuse the same as SF101? It's by a different manufacturer, but they are comparable. Like they're about the same. Like they're the same type of product. 100% cotton, woven, fusible interfacings. I use the Fashion Fuse because that's what I've been using for years and I love it. And obviously we sell it in our online shop as well. Like I mentioned, in the large size, 60 inches wide instead of just the regular 20 inches that you can get off a regular bolt. Okay. Oh, Andrea, I'm so glad to hear. She says, hi from Ohio. You have helped me improve my sewing in so many ways. Thank you. Well, you're welcome. And welcome to WIP Wednesday here. All right. Yes. Richard says, I use a pressing cloth on top of the t-shirt. It prevents the iron on prints from melting. Yes, that's key, especially if you're pressing from the pretty side of the fabric. I often, if I'm using a cotton woven fusible interfacing like this Fashion Fuse, because it's cotton, I can hit it from this side, right? When you're working with t-shirts, I mean, there could be all types of designs on them based on a ton of different screen printing techniques. So if it's vinyl or like the puffy foam vinyl on the t-shirts and screen printing or whatever it might be, sublimation, whatever, you know, it's going to be a mission for you to check and see, hey, what's on the front of this? Can I hit it with an iron? So for me, I find that it's just safer to hit it from the cotton interfacing side, but obviously using a pressing sheet would definitely work for all of that. Give yourself a buffer before you hit something with the heat of a hot iron, okay? Great, great, great. Yes. Okay. So that was that for stabilizing stretch knits. I had another little sample piece here of fabric that I wanted to show you. Another situation where you might use the Fashion Fuse, and that would be if I have a square piece of fabric here. It's not exactly square, but pretend. We talked a little bit about crosswise and lengthwise grain already, right? So my selvage, and I'll flip it this way because y'all can see the selvage edge. My selvage is here. We talked about crosswise grain runs perpendicular to the selvage, and I know that if I tug in this direction, I'm going to have a little bit of give, okay? Lengthwise grain runs parallel to the selvage, no stretch, pretty much, none at all, okay? But if you tug on the diagonal, corner to corner here, if it's a square, this is going to be 45 degrees. If I pull, look how much I can stretch it, and that's because that's the bias grain. So another thing you can do is if you need to cut out bias binding strips or bias strips to go maybe around the edge of a design or a motif or something, usually when it involves a curve, okay, we cut along the bias because that stretchiness, that give cut along the bias is going to allow us to curve around round things, and it doesn't require you to stitch it just straight in one direction or the other, okay? So because this is cotton and because the Fashion Fuse is also cotton, if you stitch this if you cut a bias strip and you cut this on the bias as well, this is still going to help preserve the stretch along the bias. Obviously, look at the weave of this and make sure that you're cutting it to match your bias strips along the bias of the cotton woven fusible interfacing too, and you'll see that it will also stretch. So if you're needing to stabilize cotton bias strips in a way that like you need a little bit more body to it, but you still want to preserve that stretch, then that would be an option, okay? And on this strip, you're not really going to be able to see it, but let me grab this chunk that has more of a larger square piece. Let me cut this chunk off. So this is more of a rectangle, but you can see that if I pull on it, you see how it stretches because it's the bias. And again, this is woven. So remember to keep those characteristics of woven and knit fabrics in mind because they can also apply to the interfacings that you're using, okay? So hopefully that helps. Yep. Oh, thank you. Don't forget to give us a like. If you learned something new in this video, feel free to share it with your friends on social media and give the video a thumbs up. And if you're new and you're watching us on YouTube, welcome. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. All right. Marilyn says, I felt that the Fashion Fuse is a bit heftier than SF101. I would have to agree. It has a little bit more body, I think, but it's still a lightweight fusible interfacing and it works fine. Okay. Zena says, that's a great tip, Vanessa. I have so much knit fabric that would make cute bags. I'm telling you, back them with this, especially if you're going to be making a pouch where you're already going to be adding some type of fusible fleece or foam interfacing or something even bulkier, then you know you're not going to be affecting the weight of the fabric by interfacing it because you're still going to add more heft to it by using a thicker interfacing for the shape of the actual bag or pouch. So yes, definitely use up your scraps, your stretch knit scraps. Again, look at the big difference. This is the same fabric. It stretches so much in every direction. Look at that. So stretchy. And just with a little piece of Fashion Fuse fused to the back of it. Look at that. Totally stabilized. So don't only use this stuff for pouches. You can make full quilts just from scraps of these. They don't have to be t-shirts, right? If it's a stretch fabric and you want to stabilize it to make it flat, make it easier for cutting crisp, without things shifting on you and for sewing straight lines without things getting distorted on you, go ahead and interface it and you can make anything. I mean, you can make pouches, pillows, full-on quilts, anything you want with this technique too, okay? All right. Well, I'm so glad that y'all are enjoying these lessons. Thank you, Tracy. I'm glad you learned something. And the only other thing I wanted to mention today before I log off here is that we have a flash sale running this week on another one of my bag classes. Y'all have been liking these weekly flash sales. And this week's flash sale is on my everyday tote. This is a big tote. Apologies, I cannot zoom out anymore with this lens. But it is a huge bag. This one I keep in a cubby down here in my craft studio because I put all my journaling and paint, like brush pen stuff in here. I just want to show y'all what it looks like. It has an inset zipper here that opens up. It's a double pull, zipper pull, okay? We have pockets all around the outside. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, plus the main zipper pocket compartment that you have in here. So I even have a sew together bag, a label maker in here, I mean a watercolor kit. I have all my lettering, paintbrush journaling books and papers and watercolor stuff. So you can see, I mean, I have over 25 pounds of stuff in here, and this is where I just keep everything in one. It makes a great diaper bag for teacher gifts. It's just a great all-around tote to pack full of stuff. And the price right now is $10 off the regular price just this week. So if you're catching us live, you can sign up today and get access to the PDF template instruction, or excuse me, the PDF supplemental text, like written instructions, and there's 7 step-by-step video lessons that you can watch at your own time and on your own pace, and they never expire. So if you're looking for another big tote bag to make, or you want to try something, this bag, believe it or not, is beginner friendly. There's just straight stitches in this project, and because we start off with a larger panel, it makes it really easy to work through, stitch all the way down in here. The straps are sewn into this. That's how I'm able to put a lot of weight in this bag, and it just holds up really well. I know a lot of you have made this bag over the years, and you see Margie saying it's great for traveling. Yeah, a lot of you have made this bag in the past, and it's always a big hit. So I just wanted to share with y'all that this class is $10 off the regular price. You don't need a coupon code, but it's good this week only. So it ends on Sunday if you're watching us live. Okay? So that's going to be it for me today. Kim is asking, is it smaller than the Sunday tote? No, actually it's a lot bigger than the Sunday tote bag, y'all. Okay? And you can find the finished measurements there. Whenever I link to the class, you'll see where it tells you the supplies that you need. It'll tell you the finished dimensions as well, so you can check that out. Okay. Yes, Star says, I love making that tote. I use it every day. Awesome. I'm glad to hear it. Well, thank you, everybody. Remember, if you do have a question that you want me to consider answering in a future WIP Wednesday episode, there is a link to a Google form in the description box below. You can type in your question there. We categorize them, and I just, slowly but surely work my way through all the questions, bringing y'all some more tips and tricks every week here on the Crafty Gemini YouTube channel and Facebook page. All right? Thanks again for tuning in, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see y'all in the next